Manchester United have just beaten Southampton 1-0. There's clearly lots of work for them to do, but in this game, actually we saw evidence that Erik can see a bad situation and make some tactical tweaks in order to turn things around for his side. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what happened in the game. So on the board in front of me here, we've got Manchester United and Southampton. Let's start off by looking at Southampton in particular, because this is a new look Southampton this season. In previous seasons, Ralph Hasenhüttl has played very aggressive gegenpressing football. We've usually seen him line up in a 4-2-2, so something like this. And then what you would expect to see is Southampton trying to get the ball into this sort of area in the centre of the field, and then have all of their players around the ball if they can, like this. And then two things can happen. First thing is you can see the direct attack, the flick on from the striker, for example, and then the other striker running on and scoring. If the opposition win the ball and it gets knocked down into this sort of area, then what is going to happen is you're going to see a really rigorous counter press from Southampton. So what they're going to try and do, just fall on the ball in this manner, try and win the ball back, and then because the opposition's defence should be all at sea because they're trying to recover from this situation, you would hope to win the ball back, play a quick pass again into the feet of the striker, and again get the shot away. This season we're seeing something completely different. Ralph Hasenhüttl has said that the energy required to play that gegenpressing style is just not worth it in the long run, and so they've torn up the copybook and they're now trying to play a little bit more possession heavy football. When you're playing gegenpressing, you're not too worried about possession because if you lose the ball you can win it back, but now Ralph Hasenhüttl looks as though he's trying to keep possession and generate chances in that way. So in this game actually we saw this a lot. We saw Manchester United sitting in their own box under a little bit of pressure, dropping in these sorts of situations, and seeing Southampton attempt to work the ball, particularly in wide areas, particularly over here on the right-hand side as well. So you've got Joe Aribo playing more as a 10, but he comes across to help out. You get these triangles here, so various things can happen. You can have Walker-Peters just coming to hit the byline here, or he could play Elyounoussi in again, and they could play the ball into the striker this way. But then the other thing that they can do is they can try and get the ball to James Ward-Prowse in this wide area here. And as we know, James Ward-Prowse, a really good ball striker, loves to play these sorts of crosses, these swinging crosses into the box. And then if you can load your players in at the back post, then you can generate chances in this way as well. Now there's a problem here because when you play in this manner, you're obviously leaving yourself exposed in these sorts of areas on the counter-attack. So Hasenhüttl loves to play with really attacking, aggressive fullbacks. You can see here Walker-Peters loves to get to the byline. Gineppo isn't even really thought of as a fullback. And so you're playing a very highly risky form of football if you're leaving space open like this. And this is even more problematic when it comes to Manchester United, because as we know, Manchester United have just played against Liverpool in a game where they were able to attack Liverpool in those wide open spaces. So they can get players through into these sorts of areas when there's not a huge amount of defensive presence at the back. We saw a goal scored where actually it was Rashford in this area and we had Martial here. The ball came to Martial and he was able to play Rashford through, and he had a one-on-one with Alisson and scored on Monday. So this is obviously a really highly risky way of playing football, and you might think that the solution to that might be to be a little bit more circumspect in your defending, drop a little bit deeper and stop leaving so much space open. But actually what Hasenhüttl did was the opposite. He actually went more aggressive in the press. He went man for man where he could, using a hybrid pressing system that we'll take a look at in a minute. But this has been an approach now that's been used by 3 teams against Manchester United. We saw it happening against Brighton in the opening day. They pushed really high forward, they went man for man, and it caused Manchester United progression problems. Same happened with Brentford, they lost that game 4-0. And then in this game as well, Southampton went man for man in a higher press, and it actually caused a lot of problems for Manchester United in terms of moving the ball down the field. And actually, by doing so, they were then able to neutralise Manchester United's counter-attacking threat. So on paper, what it looked like Ralph Hasenhüttl was doing was using a mid-block press. And what we mean by that is usually just allowing the opposition to have possession in certain areas, and then maybe going into a high press when there are certain situations, certain triggers that occur. And the trigger in this game was basically the ball being played to Raphael Varane here. So what happens in these situations is when Varane gets the ball, usually what you'll see happening is Southampton going man for man. So the first player who moves across is Che Adams. He's going to sit on Martinez, the other centre-back. Elyounoussi is already on the outside full-back here on Malacia. Armstrong on Dalot, and then you've got Aribo, Ward-Prowse and Lavia all watching their players here. Now, as soon as that ball arrives at the feet of Varane, what we actually see then is a hybrid pressing movement. So we're going to see Aribo here pushing forward onto Varane to put him under a certain amount of pressure. Now, as you can see, everyone is man for man across the back line now. And the idea then is to cause all of these problems that can stop Manchester United from progressing the ball. Now, obviously, by pushing forward onto Varane, McTominay is being left free. And this triggers another corresponding movement here from Lavia, who would drop in here and make sure that there wasn't an easy pass out, because if Varane can find Eriksen and McTominay is not being covered here, then suddenly McTominay is in space and he can move out. So Lavia pushes in here, and that stops that particular build-up pattern from occurring. Now, obviously, what's happening here is that you're leaving Fernandes free to a certain extent. You're going player for player at the back as well, which is usually seen as quite a risky thing. But the point is that if Varane tries to play the ball down the line, you've got Elanga and Djenepo man for man. If he goes down the other channel, you've got man for man here. And if you go down the middle, then you've got Salisu and Bella Kotchap, both really tall defenders who will largely just be able to hoover up that sort of attack. And it's putting the advantage in Southampton's court. Now, by pressing in this way, Ralph Hasenhüttl was able to get Southampton to half-time at 0-0. But at half-time, Erik ten Hag could clearly had a think about what was happening in the build-up process, and he had a few ideas to help his team break the opposition down a little bit better. And actually, those ideas contributed to the goal, which ended up being the winner. So let's take a look at that now. Now, when you're playing against a man-to-man system, there's two rules of thumb that you have to keep in mind. The first one is that because you're man-to-man, you can manipulate the opposition's space simply by moving. You can generate space, force your opponents into situations that they don't want, simply by moving out of an area where you might be expected to be into an area where you aren't expected to be. And so, for example, here, let's say that Eriksen and McTominay swap places, and these two players are nominally man marking them. There's an issue for Aribo and Ward-Prowse. Does Aribo follow McTominay across and Ward-Prowse follow Eriksen across? Do they pass those marking responsibilities over? And as soon as you're doing this, you're generating questions and creating the potential that one of these players could actually find space. Now, the second rule of thumb when you're playing against man marking systems is to dribble with the ball, to carry the ball, move the ball so that you're moving the structure of the opposition's defensive situation. So again, let's say Varane here has the ball. If he can, rather than play the ball out, actually dribble the ball here, carry the ball into this situation, then suddenly all of these marking responsibilities start falling to pieces, and you can start pulling the structure of the opposition apart. And that is exactly what happened for the goal itself. So let's just run through that on the board. I've got some screenshots that I can show, but I don't have the full sequence because it starts a lot further back. And that's what I want to show you, how the build-up situation actually generates the possibility of scoring later on. Both of these things are going to happen. So firstly, what we see is McTominay and Eriksen switch place. And what happens is Aribo does come across with McTominay, and this leaves Eriksen in a little bit of space. Now, because there's space here, Varane sees that space and he drives into it here. Aribo does come across to cover Eriksen, but he's not in time, because by the time he gets across, Varane has already pulled into this sort of area, and we're going to already see Southampton's structure start to get pulled apart, because Armstrong, who's normally marking Dalot, recognises that Varane is on a run and it could be dangerous, so he comes across to block off the pass here. Now we see another structural movement here. We see Elanga drop in, and we see Dalot invert over here. And again, this is another situation where Erik ten Hag has clearly told his players to move around, to rotate positions, to interchange, because then that starts leaving players unsure of who they should be marking. Should Djenepo be tracking Elanga? Should he be watching Dalot? And can you pull the opposition around and create space? Now, Armstrong isn't able to get to Varane quickly enough. The ball comes into Elanga, and what happens then is Elanga takes this really dangerous route towards goal here. Armstrong tries to catch him, but he simply can't. And there's another problem here, because actually Sancho's moved across here, so again, you're getting another change of position, another attempt to pull the structure of Southampton apart. He drops into this space here. Djenepo is worried about Elanga, so he starts moving in here, but this then generates space for Dalot, who is out on the outside here. And what happens is Elanga plays the ball to Sancho. Sancho sees Dalot's run, plays the ball into him, and then Dalot is in a lot of space, and at this point, Southampton are just trying to get back into defensive situations. All of these players are moving in this sort of area, and Fernandes has found space on the edge of the box, and Dalot can simply play this ball to him. Ball comes in, and Fernandes is able to hit it first time into the side netting. Now, obviously it's a really good finish, but the situation that this was created by all started right at the back with a few simple movements by the Man United players in build-up, which allowed them to score the goal. So let's take a look at the screenshots. So this is Manchester United attacking down the field in this way towards the goal, so the camera is where the goal is. First thing to notice, Joe Aribo here. He should have been with Raphael Varane, but because McTominay pulled across here, Aribo was pulled out of position. This is Elanga here, and as you can see, Adam Armstrong, who had been trying to tackle Varane, has to run back and he can't get into a defensive position to stop him. Gineppo is here, he recognises that this is a really dangerous run, so he comes across and then this generates space for Diogo Dalot here. And so as we can see, the ball is passed in to Sancho here. Dalot is now in a lot of space. Sancho can make that pass. And he's just in a huge amount of space here then to find Fernandes at the back post. So there's still plenty of work for Manchester United to do. They're clearly not quite firing at the level that you expect them to, but they have a manager who is able to make tactical adjustments that allow them to actually get the edge tactically as well as in terms of their talent. And if he can continue doing this until the point where his team are clicking a little bit more, then Manchester United will become ever increasingly dangerous.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic brings you the best sports journalism in the world in a personalised experience, connecting you with the stories and teams that you care about the most. There's coverage of 13 sports, plus direct access to world-class journalists through live Q&As, discussions and podcasts. Not to mention, it's all ad-free. And you can try it now for free for 30 days by clicking the link in the description.